Hello, thank you all for joining us. I am Michelle Carter from the Aram Public Library, and today we have Robert Ernie Boszhardt speaking about his book, Hidden Thunder, Rock Art of the Upper Midwest. Robert, or shall I say Ernie, as he likes to be called, will be taking us through his journeys in the upper Midwest of American Indian pictographs that have been discovered in various regions in Wisconsin and Illinois. Please keep your microphones muted. Use the chat window if you have any questions. I'll be monitoring that for Ernie. And Ernie prefers that we ask questions at the end of the presentation. So take it away, Ernie.
Thank you, Michelle. So I have a box in front of me. Let's see, hold on one second. I got to get rid of that. Okay, there we go. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. I appreciate the invitation. Just before we get into the book, a little bit about my background. I'm a Wisconsin archaeologist. My entire career, I've been in Wisconsin. I'm originally from Milwaukee. And in the early 1980s, I moved out to La Crosse on the Mississippi River. At the beginning of the start of what's the Mississippi Valley Archaeology Center, which is located at UW-La Crosse. And I was introduced to the driftless area, the unglaciated part of western Wisconsin at that time. And very soon upon getting into that area, I learned that there's some rock art sites out there. Now, I also very quickly learned that I wanted to have nothing to do with rock art because from an archaeological standpoint, rock art has two big problems. One is it's almost impossible to date, to understand how old these glyphs are, the paintings and the carvings. From an archaeological standpoint, archaeologists, we like to put things in time. We like to understand how one culture led to another culture in the sequence of events, and being able to put things in times is crucial for us to understand and reinterpret the past or interpret the past. So not being able to do that with rock art was a problem. The other problem with rock art is that it's very difficult to understand what it means. 80% of rock art is abstract symbols that we just don't have, or at the time had no idea what they meant. So not knowing the meaning, not knowing how old they are, I didn't want to have anything to do with rock art. But I was in the driftless area, and there's rock art in the driftless area. And one of the hats I wore was as the regional archaeologist at MVAC, the Mississippi Valley Archaeology Center, which meant that I had to consider all of the archaeology in that region. And that included rock art. So not too long after I got there, I started to visit some of the known rock art sites. And there was about 20 sites known at the time. And we began to see the condition of the sites. And then all of a sudden, people started to call me up and say, hey, I found a rock art site on my property. Or a hunter would come in and say, hey, I was out hunting. I came across a cave that has some glyphs in it. And I started to visit these sites. And before you know it, I got hooked. And so the story of the book Hidden Thunder takes off from that base of not wanting to do anything with rock art to becoming, without wanting to be sort of a specialist in rock art. And so I'm going to introduce the book here in a little bit. But before I do, let me just talk a little bit about rock art in general. So I'm going to go to the next slide here. So most people, when they think of rock art, they think of the famous cave paintings in France, like Lascaux and a more recently discovered Chauvet cave. These are amazing paintings on cave walls that are 30,000 years old, and they're just wonderful. And so most people are pretty familiar with those. You might be familiar with the desert Southwest, the peckings on the rock out there, and the famous Kokopelli glyph, the flute player who shows up just about everywhere, and he's become an icon and a commercial success, you can see in the lamp down below. You might be familiar, you might have heard of the X-ray glyphs from Australia, the Australian Aborigine rock art, sort of skeletons depictions. And then across Europe, these are just some examples from Ireland, the Celtic glyphs. But the point is that everywhere in the world there is rock, and there were people, there's rock art. But most people don't realize that there's rock art in Wisconsin. or in the surrounding area of the Midwest. So just to give you an idea of the known rock art regions within the Midwest, the driftless area, which is we're going to focus on in southwestern Wisconsin, this unglaciated area. That's where most of the rock art sites I'm going to talk about. But also, if you've canoed in the boundary waters of northern Minnesota and southern Ontario, Quantico, places like that, there's hundreds of red paintings on the rocks that are exposed up in that part of the world. In southwestern Minnesota, there's Pipestone National Monument, where they got the red pipestone to make pipes, and there were carvings, glyphs out there. And there's a picture of one right there. And nearby is the Jeffers Petroglyphs, which is just out on the plains of southwestern Minnesota. There's a quartzite ridge that sticks up, and there's thousands and thousands of glyphs that are pecked into that hard quartzite. And there's a picture of a hand glyph at Jeffers right there. Down into the Ozarks in southern Missouri and the lower Ohio River Valley, you get in an area where there's lots of rock exposure, and there's paintings and carvings all throughout those two regions. The tip of Door County, there's some paintings up there as well. The area surrounding the driftless area, however, immediately surrounding the driftless area, including eastern Wisconsin and most of northern Wisconsin and most of eastern Minnesota and Iowa and northern Illinois and Michigan and Indiana, there's very little rock art because those areas were glaciated, and the glaciers scoured the landscape. They filled in valleys and they plowed down hills, and there's just not much rock exposure. And so there's very little rock art outside of the driftless area until you get to these surrounding areas that are pointed out on this map. So I'm going to use some terms, and let me just define these for you. So rock art, there's several different kinds of rock art. So carvings are called petroglyphs. And you'll see here that there's two on the left that are pretty easily recognizable. One is a bird and one's a buffalo. Or a bison. And the one on the right, however, is just an abstract series of grooves in almost a grid-like pattern, but there's no recognizable animal in that abstract thing. And as I mentioned before, 80% of rock art is abstract, like the one on the right. And so they're difficult to interpret. So petroglyphs are carvings. Pictographs are paintings or drawings. And so on the left, again, you've got a red drawing of a bird-like figure that has a human arm sticking out of one wing. In the middle, there's a human figure. If I put my cursor here, right through here, his head's right through here. There's his arm coming out and the body's tattooed in through here. That's from a site called the Gotcha Rock Shelter, which is mentioned in the book. But those are, a very detailed drawing on a wall. And again, on the right, most of the pictographs are also abstract, like the one on the right. Most of the time, rock art is sort of individual glyphs, and there may be a whole bunch of individual glyphs on a rock wall, but once in a great while, the glyphs are laid out in a pattern that clearly tell a story, and we call those compositions. So this is an example from a site called Indian Cave. It's in Richland County, and on the left is a photograph of it, and on the right is a drawing of that scene. And what you can see is that here's a human being sitting down and facing another human being, and it looks like he's telling a story. And that story and there's almost like a dog sitting here listening into, but that story may be of a human bow hunter shooting at a deer over through here. Don't know exactly what that means, or if that's in fact what it's telling, but there's a story being told the way this is laid out. That's called a composition. They're very rare to find a composition. And then we have portable rock art sites. So things like stone pipes, like the owl on the lower left, that's a stone pipe. And then next to it is a sandstone pendant of a bird. Next to that is a sandstone face, a human face. And the eyes have sort of lightning bolts coming out of them. Those are called weeping eyes. Then on the right is a cat-line tablet, a red pipestone tablet that's about a foot in size. And it's got a thunderbird carved on the top of it, and he's actually swallowing like a lizard-like critter in there as well. So the thing that's important about portable rock art sites is you find them on village sites or campsites, places where we find charcoal by a fire pit, and we can take the charcoal from the fire pit and do a radiocarbon date on it, so we can get radiocarbon dates to put the portable rock art styles in time. And sometimes the glyphs that we see in portable rock art mimic ones we see on the walls of caves and things like that. And so we can apply, we can guesstimate dates on some of the rock art on the walls by using portable rock art as sort of a proxy dating mechanism. All right, the driftless area, this deeply dissected area, it's ancient landscape, never covered by glaciers, lots of erosion, lots of sandstone and limestone outcrops in that area, and rock art is found primarily on the sandstone outcrops, but you get just outlier pillars like on the upper right. You get crevices that you have to crawl into, but there's rock art carved inside those things. Rock shelters in the lower left. These are very important sites because this is where people tended to live in the wintertime. Nice, dry, sandy floors. Lots of times the ceilings are smoked from people living in there and camping in there. And then oftentimes there's rock art that's carved in the walls of those while the people live there. There's overhangs like the one on the upper right here at Twin Bluffs site. You didn't actually live in there. There's no sandy floor. It's just a flat wall that's got a shallow overhang in it, but it's a great place. The rock art's preserved because of that. And then just recently, it's not been 25 years now, but during my career, we discovered a few deep cave sites, and I'll talk about one of those today. And these are sandstone caves that go back in a couple of 100 feet, and they're dry inside, and the temperature's constant inside, and they're amazing places, pitch black inside those things. But those things, there's two that we know of now that have lots of pictographs. I'm going to talk about one of those today called Tunner Cave. All right, so Hidden Thunder is a book that was written by Geri Schrab and myself. So this is a picture. Geri's on the left with her husband Bob at the Gullickson's Glen rock art site. But Geri is she's retired now, but her career was as a court reporter. And she wasn't trained as an artist at all. But court reporting is a job that you have to sit there in a courtroom and not say a word and listen to the worst our society has to offer. And she would listen and record just the absolute worst stories that humanity has to tell. And it got to her. It's a hard job. You can't show any emotion. And so about the mid 1990s, Geri, for relief, started to just doodle with watercolors. And one of the first things she did was do a handprint. And then suddenly she got interested in rock art. And what Geri did for the next, since the mid 1990s until today, she started to visit rock art sites and feel sort of an artistic sense of those places and take photographs of the rock art. And then she started to paint the glyphs. And so they're not actual, it's not like a recording, like a photograph that we use archaeologically to a perfect example of what the rock art looks like, but she would interpret it from an artistic standpoint. So Geri and I met in the late 1990s, and we started giving some programs together. And we had a whole chunk friend, Cloris Lowe Jr., join us in some of those programs because we got Native American participation and just sharing of ideas, and we would banter around these ideas and give some programs. And so Geri came up with this crazy idea to write a book, and I said no, but she forced me to do it anyway. So we ended up writing Hidden Thunder, and it's published by the Historic Society in 2016. It's won a couple of awards. But how the book works is that we chose 12, I think a dozen sites, mostly in the driftless area, but a couple in western Minnesota, where each chapter is a site. And I would write sort of an archaeological introduction of the site, and that's what I'm going to focus on today. And then Geri would finish that chapter with her artistic interpretations of those sites. And then between every chapter, we have Native American voices. So a variety of Native American friends from Ho-Chunk, Menominee, the Anishinaabe up north, the Ojibwa, and such. Just these short sort of chapter separators, but Native perspectives on everything from poems to stories to what happened. So that's what the book's like. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take you to 3 sites that are in the book. And these are the sites that are in the book. So this is the triangles are the sites we talk about, and you can see that most of them are in the Driftless area, southwestern Wisconsin, and then there's two in southwestern Minnesota. That's Jeffers Petroglyphs and Pipestone National Monument. And I'm not going to talk about those today. I'm going to talk about Samuel's Cave, Tainter Cave, and Roche-A-Cri State Park. So here's Samuel's Cave. It's near La Crosse. This is one of the first known rock art sites in Wisconsin, in the upper Midwest. It was discovered in 1878. It was on the Samuels farm, and Frank Samuels was a teenage boy. He was out raccoon hunting on the farm in this little canyon-like valley. And he came across, at that time, it was almost closed off a little hole in the side of this valley. And his dog went into it, and he saw that it opened up. And so he went back and got some friends, and they got some lanterns, and they went inside, they crawled inside, and they saw that the walls had carvings on them, Indian carvings. And then they carved their names on the walls too. So they started adding graffiti. But word got out to La Crosse, and the next summer, the Reverend Edward Brown came, and he did tracings. He did rubbings like you might do on a tombstone to record the carvings on the wall. And then he published those in a local paper. So in the lower left, his rubbings are preserved at the State Historical Society in Madison. So this is a rubbing of clearly a deer buck or an elk buck. This is like a bird foot, and this is sort of some sort of human-like figure that's kind of eroded away there. But these are his rubbings, and then he just sort of put them together in a publication. And you can see in here, there's buffalo, like this guy's got the hump and the horns. There's that deer with the elk, the buck. There's a bow hunter. There's like a prairie chicken type bird. There's some abstract things down in the lower left, and then there's this guy right here. I'll show you him a couple times. He's a human with a headdress. Okay, we're going to come back to him a couple times. So those were recorded in 1878. The next year, the State Historical Society sent archaeologists. Now, there were no archaeologists at the time, but they sent people to dig the site, and they dug Samuel's Cave. They dug the floor of it, and they wrote a report, and they described that there were 4 cultural layers in that floor, sort of stratified layers of culture, and they found bone tools and some pottery, and they described some of the pottery. And one of those pieces of pottery went to the Peabody Museum in Harvard, and this is that piece of pottery right there. This is the entry where it was donated by L.S.B. Usher from La Crosse, sort of a well-known person at the time. So we now know that type of pottery is something we call Alam-A-Cri trail. And Alam-A-Cri trail, this is what it looks like if you find a whole pot. And what you have on this, the fragment or the sherd from Samuel's, is you've got some dots and then lines. I can't get my cursor to show that, but it'd be like this area, the pot right through there, some lines and sections. So we also know that Alam-A-Cri trail now dates to about AD 1400, 1600. So pretty late in the pre-contact or pre-French era, but so at least some of the art in Samuel's Cave was probably drawn by people who made this kind of pottery, and we call those people the Oneota culture in the La Crosse area. Samuel's Cave was visited time and again by people. In 1928 to 1930, the Milwaukee Public Museum went to western Wisconsin, and they excavated a bunch of Indian mounds and village sites, but also on weekends they'd go visit rock art sites. And they went to Samuel's Cave, and they took the first photographs of the glyphs in Samuel's Cave, and they chalked those photographs. We don't do that anymore, but they put chalk in there to see them better. And you can see here's one of the animals that was actually traced earlier. You could also see some letters. There's the letter A, and so there's some of the graffiti on top of that. And they also chalked and photographed this long tail, like lizard-like creature. There's the head, claw-like feet, and the long tail going down. So that's a photograph from Milwaukee Public Museum, 1928-29. So Samuel's Cave was then left to people just to go visit on their own for almost 100 years. And I first went there in 1986. I started in La Crosse in 82, and this was the first rock art site I visited. And by the time I got there, the walls were covered in names and dates and historic graffiti. The Samuels had opened up the door, and the floor was excavated. So freeze thaw had started to affect the walls. And with sandstone inside a cave is constant temperature of 45 degrees, and then suddenly it's freezing and thawing, it starts to break away, it exfoliates. So in the lower right of this picture, this whole area in the lower right, this yellow area, that's all fallen away. So if there were glyphs there, they're gone. But you can also see, here's that headless, or the human with the headdress still preserved there. So when we got there, most of the glyphs that had been recorded back in the 1870s were gone, but there were about 10 carvings left. We also found in the back of this cave pictographs, drawings that had never been seen before. And you can see them on the wall here. Oh, there you go. So the dark, this is a glyph here. There's a head, almost looks like it's wearing a turban. There's the vertical lines on the face. Here's arms, the body coming down, and almost like wearing a fringe dress, almost like turtle feet. There's another glyph down here. There's another glyph through here. That's actually the horns of a buffalo, and there's the snout coming back. And here is actually that long-horned, or that long-tailed petroglyph that McKern's group photographed in 1929. They chalked and photographed this. They never even saw the drawings above it. There's like a moon-like thing here. Hard to see, so you draw it, and this is what it looks like this is just the pictographs now. Except this has the long-tailed lizard-like creature carved over the back of this guy. So here's that bubble man, we call him, because somebody carved bubble over the belly of him. There's a bird-like creature through here, the buffalo, and that. So pictographs, pretty rare. Most of the rock art in Wisconsin are petroglyphs, carvings. Pictographs are rare, so this is a very rare find. And because of that, Samuels Cave suddenly got significant again, and we got some funding to try to preserve it, record it. And we hired Yanni Laubser, a South African archaeologist who documents rock art across the country. And he came and he did a very thorough recordation of what was left there, wrote a big report. Excuse me. We built a gate over the front of it. The local landowner was a carpenter, and he built this gate. We insulated the door to try to keep people out, and it worked for about 3 years. And then vandals came in and busted through, and this is what the gate looks like, today to this day. So it's hard to monitor this thing because nobody lives right next to it. The landowner lives over a hill. He can't see the site from his property. So people sneak in and still do vandalism to it. It's a shame. So Samuels Cave is a frustrating site. It's got an interesting history, but when you go in there, you just feel like it's vandalized, violated. And Geri felt that. And so Geri's first painting of Samuels Cave was of the headless, the human with the headdress. And she called this healing because Samuels Cave was like the courtroom for her. It was like listening to the damage that happens to people. This was a site that was violated. And so she used the human with the headdress is sort of like a healing kind of thing I mean, that's what she calls her painting. That's her sense from that site. All right. The next site I'm going to take you is called Tunner Cave. Now, Tunner Cave wasn't discovered until the 1990s. This is one of these deep caves. It goes back several hundred feet. This is the entrance of it. The story of its discovery is that I had a friend named Daniel Arnold, who was a caver, and he went out in 1993 and visited this site. I had never heard of it before. And he wrote me a letter. He said, hey, there's this cave, it goes way back in the hillside, and it's got drawings all over the walls, deer hunters and whatnot. And there's birch bark torches laying on the ground. And I was like, that doesn't exist in our part of the world. And so I filed his letter away for 5 years. And then in 1998 or 99, I had a project in that area. So I found his letter and I went out to it. And sure enough, this cave is real and it's full of rock art. So I blew that for 5 years. But anyway, Tunner Cave, this is the story of Tunner Cave. So when you go in the entrance, it's not a big entrance. It's 3 feet tall, 20 feet across. Light can go into this very entrance, and there's carvings at the entrance. So here you see a diamond with a dot. That's a very common abstract glyph type in our area. Then the cave goes back from the first room is about 30 feet deep, and it's an arching chamber. And then there's this entrance to go to the second room, which goes another 50 feet or so. You have to duck walk to get through this passageway to get to the second room. And then that opens up to a third room. So this whole thing is about 200 feet deep. You get to the back of the first room and you need a flashlight. You get to the second room, you can't see it at all without artificial light. And there's art in all three rooms. So they had to use torches. And sure enough, there's birch bark torches laying on the floor of Tunner Cave. And we also found the hide, the sole of a hide moccasin laying on the floor. Now in Wisconsin, we never find leather on artifacts because it just decomposes. But when you get into a situation where the temperature is constant and the humidity is constant, like a cave, you can get good preservation. And that's what's going on at Tunner Cave. So it was a very special cave. On the walls, we find paintings, lots of pictographs. And on the left side, you can see some deer on the top, and in the middle, it's a little hard to see because this is near the entrance and you can see some green from algae growing, but there's a body of a big deer right through here. The antler rack is right there. There's the snout, neck coming down in the body. There's his hind legs and the front legs would be there. He has actually a human leg almost riding on him right through there. There was enough charcoal on this body that we were able to just pick away a tiny little bit. And there's a new radiocarbon method available at the time, and people still use it today, that allows you to date 5 milligrams. It's almost microscopic of organic material. So we were able to get the first radiocarbon date of a rock art site in Wisconsin from this glyph right here, and that was drawn around AD 700. Okay, so it's about 1,300 years old. Down below, you see another animal outlined with this long horns. That may be an extinct form of bison, a longhorn form of bison called Bison occidentalis. On the right side are 2 abstract glyphs, just some weird grid-like lines. I have no idea what these might mean. And here's a box in the third room, 2 triangles inside, and there's a spike driven through it. No idea what that means. Okay, but you got those abstract glyphs. At the back of the first room is this panel. And it's just a collage of abstract symbols at first. There's arcs and spikes and things, right? It's just what is this stuff? But when you look carefully, there is a human figure right here, and there's a bird here, and there's a lizard down below. So here's that bird. It's a stylized bird. All it is a V with an arc on it, no head, but that's a bird. And at the bottom is a lizard-like creature, okay? And the positioning of these, bird on top, lizard on the bottom, conforms with Native American cosmologies. Many Native American tribes have an upper world, an earth world, a middle world, and a lower world. And the lower world is dominated by water panthers and underworld spirits that have long tails. And they're typically not good for people. Okay, they will, a water panther will tip over your canoe if you don't offer tobacco to that lake, to him before, in the body of water beforehand. They live in rapids and things like that. When people drown, they're drowned by things like water panthers, long-tailed spirits. And in the upper world, you get thunderbirds, and thunderbirds are good to people, and they battle underworld spirits in thunderstorms. That's what a thunderstorm is. The thunderbird flashes lightning from its eyes to kill the underworld spirits, and when it flaps its wings, that's what makes the thunder. And then in the middle, in the earth world, you get this human-like figure. Okay, so there's all these abstract things, but you have their cosmology represented by the positioning of the bird, earth, and underworld right through there. Okay, so here's that human figure. And when you look at it, it's got its arms are out and up, okay? And that style is commonly thought of as representing a shaman, a medicine person, a powerful person who has the ability to connect to the gods, to the spirit world. And coming out of where the head would be, there's no head there, are zigzag lines. Those are like lightning bolts. There's 2 coming down and one going off to this way. There's probably another one going off that way. So that's a powerful person. Okay. This is Geri's painting of that spirit being, or I'm sorry, not the spirit being, but that human. And I think she calls it he who has power. In the back room is this glyph, and it's a human-like figure, but the arms are turned down. And I interpreted this initially as a bird man, because you get combination people and birds sometimes. And I just said, well, there's a bird man. Geri looked at this, she said, that's a birthing scene. And this is her painting of it. And sure enough, around, when you do research into rock art in the Midwest, when arms are turned down, there's oftentimes it's like a woman bearing down, giving birth, and there's clearly something coming out, of the birth canal in the glyph there. So she recognized that as birthing, and then I realized that there were women in prehistory too. So it's a male-dominated field, and Geri and I joke about that all the time. But Geri opened my eyes to think about these things in a different way. In the very entrance, right when you walk into Tunner Cave, you're on your hands and knees in the low entrance. If you flip over and look up, straight up, you see this combination of glyphs. And this is a drawing of what it is. So there's a round thing here, and that's like a head, and then this area here, and there's a little person in the middle. But there's this clear bird over through here. One of the wings is broken away. It's a speckled falcon-like creature. Okay. This thing on the right, a colleague of mine, Jim Fiedler, said, well, you know what that looks like? It looks like a cradle board. And sure enough, this is a drawing of a cradle board from George Catlin in the 1830s. And Native Americans, many Native American groups, including Ho-Chunk Menominee in this area, in an infant, when the women would do chores, they would wrap the baby in a cradle board. And they were highly decorated with horizontal bands going across, and this one has something right in a circle in the chest area too. Well, on Catlin's drawing of this cradle board, dangling from the protective bar in front is a bag, and that bag he recorded that bag carried the dried umbilical cord of the baby, and that umbilical cord was protective. It was like power medicine to protect the baby. And so Catlin tried to buy some of these from the Mandan women out west, and they said, well, you can have the pouch, but you cannot have the umbilical cord. So you wonder if in this painting in Tunner Cave, if I can get my cursor to work here, if this circle area might represent something like the bag dangling through there. Don't know, but that's a possibility. This is Geri's painting then of that scene, okay? And it may be that you have an infant in a cradle board, and it's connecting to a spirit, and it's a naming. Maybe that bird's name has something to do with young hawk or something like that. In the middle room of Tunner Cave, there's a drawing. This is way back in the dark zone, and this panel is one of these compositions. So you can get my cursor. So what you have is a horizontal fault line, and there's glyphs above it, and there's glyphs below it, drawings above and drawings below. And this is a drawing of it, and you get a better sense of it. So above that fault line, there are stylized birds. There's a bird foot, there's a bird wing, there's another stylized bird over through here, there's a feather-like thing. This is a stylized bird as well. And then down below what you have is a whole bunch of bow hunters. This one's horizontal shooting down, that one's standing up shooting in, this one's standing up shooting this way, and there's 7 deer and 9 bow hunters. And several of the deer, like this one here, have baby deer drawn in the abdomen. So deer, all fawns are dropped in May. So deer rut in the fall, and the does are pregnant through the winter. Winter is the season of starvation. Right now, there's very little food out on the landscape. If you're living off the land, this is the lean time of year. This is when you might starve to death. If you can get a deer now, it's hugely important. And if you get deep snow, deer will yard up, and you can get a group of deer, like a cedar grove, and might be surrounded by a group of hunters. And so perhaps this lower scene is a successful hunt, or a prayer to have a successful hunt to get through the season of starvation. So, but besides the deer hunting scene with the sky above, this again tells this cosmologically breaks sky world from earth world. Okay. So Tunner Cave was first deep cave site ever found in this part of the world. It has amazing glyphs. It's got preservation that we've never seen before. So we worked with the American Cave Conservation Society to build a gate here. And these are steel beams that we carried, we hauled up this bluff, and a welder come in and cut them, and designed by cave specialists to build this cave. It allows the cave to breathe. Bats can come and go, but people can't get in and out. So the cave is protected from vandalism, because besides all the art I showed you in there, there's lots of graffiti as well. So lots of people had been going in there. First time I went in there, there was 66 cans of Budweiser in the back room. They were all empty, by the way. All right. The last site I'm going to show you is Roche-A-Cri State Park. And I show this because this is the only rock art site that is publicly available in Wisconsin. So if you want to go see a rock art site, go to Roche-A-Cri. It's in the center part of the state near Adams Friendship. It's a very nice little park. And what it is it's in the middle of a sandy plain, glacial lake, Wisconsin, that drained 14,000 years ago. It's an outlier sandstone bluff that sticks up 300 feet above the surrounding landscape. And it's made out of sandstone. And at the south end of that sandstone, there's a face, and on that face is all sorts of carvings, that have been known for quite a while. So in the 1850s, the government land surveyors came through, and they rarely talked about archaeological features like mounds or rock art, but this particular surveyor did mention, he says, in the east half of section 31 is the famous Roche-A-Cri or Castle Rock. The rock rises 300 feet, sandstone, and on its sides, hieroglyphs of antiquated appearance can be found in any extent. In some places, 10 to 100 feet square foot are closely written in these characters. From the appearance, they must have been written centuries ago. They would afford interesting occupation to the antiquarian. So interesting, this guy observed and recorded that there's rock art at Roche-A-Cri in 1851. This is just another angle of you can see some of the carvings on here with some of Geri's paintings now. So you can see these crescent-like things here. Geri interprets those as canoes. And this is just some of the abstract glyphs over on this side. But you can go there. The DNR built a deck, and there's interpretive science. You can go and understand it. When it was first recorded in the 1919 was the first time anybody actually described the rock art there, and they described carvings only, petroglyphs. Nobody can see underneath that. And if you look carefully, there's a bird here and a human there and another human there. So there's pictographs at Roche-A-Cri that weren't known before. There's a new technology called D-Stretch, which allows you to enhance colors in digital photographs. And this is a D-Stretch. This is that same photograph using D-Stretch, and you can see the wings of the Thunderbird here, connected by a zigzag line to this human who has horns on its head, and then another human back through this way. So pictograph, again, pretty rare at Roche-A-Cri. There's another pictograph down below, and in the lower left, you can barely see it here. It's really hard to see, but D-Stretch really brings it out. And it's another bird-like creature. There's wings, and it coming out of the beak is a zigzag line like a lightning bolt again coming down. So that's a thunderbird, probably, almost certainly. So this is that lower glyph, the really hard one to see. W from Green Bay wrote in crayon over the top of it. This is D-Stretch of that same glyph, and then this is Geri's artistic interpretation of that Thunderbird, okay, in her watercolors. This is Geri's. I'm sorry. This is Geri's painting of the Thunderbird up above, connected to the human by the JSF. Okay, so that's kind of a quick, quick tour through a couple rock art sites, and just be aware that there's rock art in Wisconsin, mostly in the southwestern part. But if you want more information, Hidden Thunder obviously is I highly recommend it. The Historic Society did a great job writing that book or publishing that book. Sorry. There is Driftless Pathways, the company that Daniela, my wife Danielle, and I run. We offer several books. Deep Cave tells the story of Tunner Cave, and another one called Larson Cave that was found a few years later. 12 Millennia is the archaeology of the Upper Mississippi River Valley by James Thieler and myself. Just talks about just the archaeology of that region. And then Danielle and I have a book about some research we're doing up in Trempealeau. So that's my commercial. And then I have to show this slide too, and then I can take questions. The State Historic Study wants you to let them know what you think of this event. And here's how you do that. All right. So Michelle, I'm done. How do you want me to do this now?
So thank you very much, Ernie. That was really spectacular.
Thank you.
I have changed the view.
Okay.
So now it's everyone's opportunity to ask Ernie any questions. I have muted several people, so you're going to have to unmute your microphones, or if you like, you can ask a question in the chat and I'll see it there as well. So now's your opportunity to ask Ernie any questions you may have. I want to thank you, Ernie. That was really spectacular.
Well, thank you.
Very interesting. I didn't realize so much of the art was in the Driftless region. It's what a gem the Driftless region is. I just love that area.
Yeah, I never knew much about it. Geri's impetus for writing the book is she was doing her rocker paintings, and she'd go to art fairs, and she'd be showing her work, and people would come up and say, "Wow, that's great. Where's that from?" And she'd say, "Oh, that's from Southwest Wisconsin." People were like, "No way, there's no art in this part of the world." So that made her and I same thing. That realized most people just have no idea that this stuff exists right in our state. So,
all right. Well, it looks like we don't have any questions. Anybody? You are getting many thanks in the chat window, so thank you, Ernie.
My pleasure. Thank you for coming.
All right. If you guys want to follow up with questions, I can certainly email Ernie with follow-up for you. And you have, I think he gave you also a survey and email address as well. And we will be hosting this on our YouTube and Facebook channels momentarily in the next couple of days. All right. Well, Ernie, thank you. Thank you so much for your time today. And please thank your lovely assistant for all of the tech help.
All right, will do. All right.
All right. Bye-bye. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Bye-bye.
Bye.